wind skittered dust across the ranch yard long before dawn, rattling the loose boards on the porch as if tapping out a warning the cowboy wished he'd listened to sooner. He had expected her 2 days ago, expected her wagon to roll in slow from the east, expected a shy wave, expected the beginning of something, better than the lonely routines that had worn him thin year after year. But the road stayed, empty through sunrise and into another night, and his 6-year-old daughter kept asking questions he couldn't answer. She had been the one most excited about the mail-order bride coming, painting wild pictures in her small mind of someone gentle who might braid her hair and hum, her to sleep while the evening wind whispered through the cottonwoods. So when the second day ended with nothing but a blood-red sky and silence, the worry inside him hardened like cooling iron, and he couldn't sit still anymore. He saddled his horse, lifted his daughter up behind him, and followed the single wagon trail leading east. The prairie felt wrong, too quiet, as though the land itself held its breath. Hours passed, the sun crawling upward and warming nothing but the dread inside him. They rode past the dry creek bed, past a line of blackened fence posts struck by lightning weeks earlier, and the girl tightened her arms around him every time the horse snorted. At shapes in the distance, he tried to keep his voice steady as he told her stories to distract her, stories of when her mother had laughed under these same skies, but something dark kept coiling inside him, urging him faster. Around midday, they found the first sign, a torn scrap of blue fabric snagged on a mesquite thorn, fluttering weakly like it wanted to escape. His daughter leaned forward and whispered, "Is that hers?" And he couldn't make himself answer. They pressed on, the air growing thicker, the quiet strangely weighted. A few miles farther, they found the second sign, wheel ruts gouged too deep into the earth, wobbling as if the wagon had swerved wildly. He dismounted, crouched, ran his fingers along the ruts, feeling the way the soil had churned in panic. His daughter didn't speak now. She just stared, her small hands trembling against the saddle horn. The cowboy felt the cold crawl up his spine despite the heat, and the faint smell of smoke reached them, sharp and sour. They followed it until cresting a low rise where the world seemed to stop moving. Below lay the wagon, what was left of. It splintered across the ground like a broken skeleton. The canvas hung in tatters, one wheel lay half buried in dust, and the horses were gone, ripped free or chased off. The girl pressed her face against his back, refusing to look. He walked the wreckage slowly, forcing himself not to imagine what might be waiting under each overturned board. A single trunk lay cracked open, spilling clothing, small things, delicate things, onto the dirt, and he recognized the handwriting on a fallen envelope addressed to him, now smeared with dust and something darker he dared not touch. The wind carried a strange silence, not the empty kind, but the kind that hides something. He followed the drag marks, 2 sets, one small like someone's boots scraping desperately, the other deep like something heavy had been hauled, with his daughter clutching his shirt, not wanting him to let go. The trail led past the shattered wagon tongue and into a tangle of brush where the shadows pooled so thick they seemed to breathe. The cowboy stepped carefully, each footfall slow, the pounding of his heart loud enough. He was sure whoever or whatever had been here would hear it. The girl whispered, "Papa, don't," but he couldn't stop. Something metallic glinted ahead, half buried in dirt, a dropped hairpin still warm from the sun. Behind it, footprints, too large, too heavy, led back and forth as though someone had paced, waiting, deciding. He swallowed hard, tasting dust and fear, and pushed deeper into the brush until the world narrowed to the sound of flies, buzzing somewhere up ahead. His daughter whimpered, burying her face into his shoulder as he carried her, and at that moment he almost turned back, but then he saw the faintest movement beneath a fallen branch, the corner of a torn skirt shifting in the breeze. He rushed forward, dropping to his knees as he reached out. What he found was enough to make his blood freeze. She was there, lying half hidden under debris, pale as winter bone, barely breathing, her pulse a faint flutter beneath skin gone cold as stone. Her eyes opened for only a second, glassy and terrified, and she whispered something he couldn't understand before going limp again. His daughter clung tighter, trembling. The cowboy looked around, sensing eyes in the bushes, sensing danger not finished yet. The air felt hunted, but he gathered the woman into his arms, lifting her gently, feeling the fragile weight of someone who had nearly been taken from the world. and hurried back toward the shattered wagon as the sky darkened unnaturally fast, as though warning him that whatever had done this wasn't done yet. He placed her on the least broken piece of canvas and checked her pulse again, refusing to let fear choke him. His daughter knelt beside the woman, brushing dirt from her cheek with a tiny hand, whispering, "It's okay. We found you." Even though both of them knew nothing was okay, the cowboy scanned the horizon, feeling watched, feeling the tingling prickle along the back of his neck that said the prairie itself had turned predator. He gathered what supplies hadn't burned: half a canteen, a torn blanket, a jar of salve the woman must have brought, and worked quickly, every movement sharp with urgency. She stirred once, flinching violently, mumbling about shadows and a man with no voice, and then she recoiled as if remembering something too horrible to face. The cowboy soothed her, though his own hands trembled, and tried to piece together what had happened by studying the wreckage again. The wagon tongue hadn't broken. It had been hacked. The canvas hadn't torn from the crash. It had been ripped deliberately. And those drag marks, they weren't from her alone. Something else had been moved too, and the track suggested it fought harder. His stomach twisted. He told his daughter to stay close, not to wander even a step. The sun dipped lower, and with the lengthening shadows came sounds, soft ones at first, like distant crunches, then clearer, like someone stepping carefully over dry brush. His horse snorted and backed away, ears pinned. The cowboy drew his revolver, holding it low, the weight of it grounding him against the rising terror. He thought of riding home immediately, but the woman was too weak to endure the trip, and he didn't know how many miles the threat trailed. The girl tugged his sleeve, whispering that she saw something move near the ridge, something hunched. He looked, and though he saw nothing definite, the sense of being hunted grew heavier, thick enough to taste. He forced himself not to run. Instead, he built a small fire, shielding its glow with debris so it wouldn't signal their location too far. As he worked, the woman's eyes fluttered open again, wide with panic. She grabbed his wrist with surprising strength. Gasping words he finally understood. "He's coming back." His daughter buried her face against him, trembling so hard he felt it even through his coat. He asked who, but the woman choked, unable to speak, tears streaking mud down her cheeks. The cowboy steadied her, promised he wouldn't let anything happen to her or his child. But even as he said it, he felt the shadows gathering too close. A coyote howled, 3 short cries. One long, and something answered from much nearer. Something not coyote at all. He stoked the fire, keeping it bright, knowing light was the only thing predators hesitated around. Hours crawled like wounded things. Every so often the brush rustled with quiet, deliberate movements circling. The cowboy didn't sleep. His daughter lay curled against his side. The woman shook with fever and fear, whispering half-formed warnings about someone who followed wagons, someone who waited for them to break down, someone whose face she never saw because he hid behind a sackcloth hood. When dawn finally came, it came pale and weak, as though reluctant to touch the ground where something evil had prowled. The noises faded with the first sliver of sun, and the cowboy seized the chance. He hoisted the woman onto the horse's back, securing her with rope and blanket, then lifted his daughter up to hold her steady. He led the horse on foot, moving fast, scanning every ridge for movement. The prairie stretched out empty, but emptiness no longer brought comfort. Midday heat rose in shimmering waves, yet the air felt cold where it brushed the back of his neck. The woman moaned once, drifting between consciousness and nightmares. The girl sang quietly to her, a shaky lullaby meant to keep her awake. They reached the old creek bed by afternoon, and the cowboy dared to believe they might make it home, safely, until he saw fresh prints in the dust, matching the heavy ones from the wreck site, walking parallel to their path as if hurting them. He didn't tell his daughter. There was no point frightening her further. He just tightened his grip on the reins and pushed harder. Sweat stung his eyes, and the horse grew nervous again, ears flicking in every direction. By the time the ranch roof finally rose into view, the cowboy nearly collapsed from relief. But even then, he didn't relax. Not until he had carried the woman inside, barred the doors, and made sure his daughter stayed behind him while he checked each window. Only then did he allow his breath to slow. The woman rested in his late wife's bed, pale but alive. His daughter curled beside her, holding her hand gently, whispering that they were safe now. The cowboy wished he could believe it, because outside, somewhere beyond the far fence line, Something moved with the patience of a hunter who'd already marked them, and though he couldn't yet see it, he felt deep in his bones that whatever had destroyed the wagon and nearly killed the woman hadn't been finished at all, only interrupted. The prairie wind rattled the windows again, tapping out a warning he could no longer ignore, carrying with it the faint scent of smoke and something far worse, something that promised the nightmare had only just begun.